Good evening, everyone. Just want to thank everyone for being here this evening. This is our third event for Humanity 101. We are excited to have all of you here. Obviously, it's a very small group this evening, but we are glad nonetheless to have y'all. So I'm just going to get right into it and talk about our panelists. So our first panelist for the evening is Nick DeBanda. A born and raised Texan, Nick, now 29 years of age, resides in Dallas. After graduating from a rural town in East Texas, he moved on to earning a bachelor's degree at the University of North Texas in fashion merchandising. An experienced Texan raised on Southern values, Nick has evolved within DFW's LGBTQ community for over a decade into the proud homosexual he is today. So welcome, Nick, everyone.
Welcome, Nick.
Our second panelist for the evening is Brad Pritchett. Brad is the Tony Award-winning communication specialist, host, MC, model, and fashionista, as you can tell. Brad is the Regional VP of Communications for American Heart Association, where he manages all of the marketing, PR, advertising, and strategies for North Texas. Brad has professionally entertained audiences all over the world, including Disney, Six Flags, some cruise lines, the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and theaters throughout Branson, Missouri. Brad has hosted and emceed countless high-profile charity events all over the country and is the face and host of Dallas Voice Television. He has also worked as an arts host and contributor for the WFAA Channel 8. Welcome, Brad. And then rounding out our panel for the evening is Mark Oram. We are glad to have Mark with us. Mark is a realtor who has lived in the Dallas area and worked here since 1978. He moved here when he was 18 years old. Some of Mark's interests include antique autos, travel, theater, and politics. He's also an avid reader of history and a former drug abuse counselor. Mark is also planning to retire in 2020 into Costa Rica. So welcome, Mark. All right, we will go ahead and get started. If you guys need the restroom, they are just down here through these double doors to the left, and I think the ladies is to the right. Drinks are downstairs. And again, thank you guys for being here.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this third panel. So it's going to be a very casual conversation. It's recorded, so feel free to speak your mind and flow however you want to. We're not here to, dig so deep that you're like Barbara Walters, like 2020 type interview.
I was prepared for the Barbara approach. So.
Yes. Oh, well, I was gonna do the Oprah approach and just be like,
I like that better.
Or do the whole like pause where you're just like, just 1 second. But so it's Pride Month, and we wanted to do a panel discussion on being out gay men throughout different decades, because everybody's experience, even within the community, is different, no matter whether it be your race, social class, your background. We all come with different experiences. And all of you experienced being gay in your 20s in different decades. We have people from the 2010s, the 2000s, and the 1980s. And there were so many different things that were occurring in each of your timelines that has in many ways impacted us today, or influenced how we all, I'd say as a culture, even engage one another. So what we're going to do is that we're going to first allow you guys to introduce yourselves and kind of give us a little bit of a snapshot of your background and your experience. If we could start off with, let's go with Nick first.
So I actually was born and raised in small towns. First in West Texas. It's basically where my entire family origin is from, mother and father. I'm biracial, so I'm Mexican and Caucasian. But we switched and moved all the way to East Texas after I was about 7 years old, for a stepfather that kind of stepped in. I was born with an older sister. My mom had all three of us by the time she was 21, and was single from that point. About 3 years old is when my parents separated, because my father was 19. So, in a small town, there's nothing else to do but have a kid, I guess. So she had three. Yeah, definitely, one of the two. So she had 3. I absolutely love my childhood. It's not the same childhood everyone has. It's, single mother stories are hard, and there were hardships in my life, but I feel like there are, many more stories out there that were a lot harder than what I had. So I'm very, very happy for the growth that I've gotten from that and kind of been an old soul from it, I guess. But I guess I first knew I was gay when I was 6. I know that's kind of odd, but it was just, there was a moment that I had that I just kind of felt this inkling with my mom, who was a single mother, had a roommate, and I had a slight little crush on my 6-year-old best friend. So, and that was the first time I ever kind of understood what that feeling was. But being raised in a very Baptist, non-denominational home, that was definitely very early on something that developed as an insecurity versus something I'm proud of, or was proud of at that time. So it was kind of hard coming out at 17, a senior in high school.
What year was that, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, that was 2007.
2007, okay.
And I was 17.
Okay.
So that was rough. I was in a secret relationship in my small town with a boy from the next small town over. And there was things that were going on in that relationship that kind of created this anxiety within me, which I discovered is an actual condition I deal with on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of in tears came out and just didn't know what else to do. I felt like there was like nowhere else or no one else to go to but my mother, who I had developed a very strong relationship with. Being the middle, I somehow managed to be the glue of our little small unit family. So that was tough because it was the first time I had ever experienced my mother resisting who I was and not understanding where it was coming from. She was a very anxious woman herself, so it was born from a lot of fear and ignorance. So that was a very, very difficult time. And when I basically switched and moved to DFW, so I graduated high school, immediately left Canton, never went back, will not go back. Because it's just not for me as an individual. It was a very rough, high school life, being in a small town and not being that kind of societal norm boy, So
how was your experience when you moved to Dallas? What was that like for you?
At
that time.
Yeah, I looked back. I had to kind of rethink about it because so much has happened. I literally came into Dallas with this very naive conservative concept, and that comes from that devout Baptist raising. In that, I used to think I could only have sex with a man if he was somebody I was in a relationship with, and I needed to present myself in a certain way and kind of think about things and do certain things in a certain way that would be still considered, I guess, mildly honorable in some way. And that's just kind of from that Southern Baptist upbringing, in the sense that you don't talk about sex. You don't really, discuss that you're even gay in that sense. So you have to present yourself in a certain way. And so it kind of created a very difficult insecurity within me and how I presented myself to the gay community at that time. I was very straight edge, like I said, sex is with one person that you're dating and in a relationship with. I didn't ever use drugs until I was 25 years old. Things have changed.
Okay.
So I feel like that is almost like this crazy precipice of from 25 to now 29. I have grown so much more into an individual that embraces, being a fucking fag. I love being gay. I absolutely love and appreciate other people that find confidence in themselves just being 100% yourself. I think my favorite thing to say when I'm out or in a crowd or what have you is, yes, bitch. I just really appreciate other people that love to be themselves. And so I guess I kind of, in that second half, began to really embrace and identify the queerness of myself and embrace the deeper, darker part of myself that, as I was younger, would kind of hold back from and not present.
Gotcha.
And as a Cancer, I love the dark and the mysterious, so it's been something that I've kind of celebrated and really started to embrace within myself throughout the last 4 years.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to talk more about your experience, but now on to Mr. Brad.
I feel like we probably went to the same church. I was also born and raised Southern Baptist in Duncanville, Texas, where it was just a different time. My mother was our Sunday school teacher. My dad was the deacon. We were in the church anytime the doors were open, every single night of the week and on the weekends. And I always had a flamboyant side, but I repressed that so much growing up because in our household, the terms fag were used derogatorily speaking, and gay this and sissy that. And my parents would do anything and everything they could to push that side away. My mom put me in gymnastics. My dad put me in baseball. My mom put me in theater. My dad made me run track. So there was this give and take all throughout growing up as a child where I just thought, I know I'm different. I mean, when I was 6 years old as well, I shoved the napkin rings from our place setting on my wrist and grabbed my mom's heels and spun around like Wonder Woman because I knew, I'm like, something is definitely different with me. And my dad had to come home and get a hacksaw and get the damn napkin rings off my wrist. So my mother is like, no, something's up. Her heels were out. My sweet boy is different. Meanwhile, she's like, don't act that way in front of your father. So it just was this give and take, this weird synergy growing up that I got really good at putting on a different act and a different face. It's probably why I love doing theater, to the point where went to high school, was very extroverted, involved in every single thing, the mascot, student council, again, up at the school anytime we could be at the school. But I had a girlfriend. And that girlfriend followed me to UNT, and we got engaged. And we were together for 4 years and sexually active. And I thought, oh, God, okay, I can still be normal. I don't have to go down this gay route because, 18, your dick can get hard if the wind blows right. So I was just thinking, I can do this. I have faked everybody. And it wasn't until I was performing at Six Flags at the time, and Kelly Clarkson was my partner. And I would drive her home to Burleson every night, and she was like, girl, you got to look into this other side of you. I was like, girl, what do you mean, girl? Do you know? She's like, you're not fooling anybody. And so she went off to LA. That's right when she had won Idol. And then I went off and took a cruise ship gig. And it was whilst living on the cruise ship, you're forced to deal with whatever inner demons or inner thoughts. You're in a room the size of this little area here, and I had a gay roommate. And working on that cruise ship for 6 months is what gave me the courage to come back to Dallas and start the coming out process, which for me didn't happen until I was 25 years old by that time.
And what year was that?
That was 2005.
2005.
Yeah.
So when you came back to Dallas, what was your experience because before, had you been out in the neighborhood? I
had always come out with friends, and we'd always found a way to sort of like disguise ourselves because, we just thought everyone was going to out us and tell our families and friends and stuff. And so we got very creative with what we would, I feel like the bars were even different back then. I think this used to be TMC before it was Sue Ellen's. So we would come here, but it was just a different feeling. But even looking back then to now, being so comfortable and being an advocate in the public eye, with even being on the board of Black Tie Dinner, to think back then it was just such a different world, and I was not comfortable in my skin. I was not okay with it. And then slowly but surely, I came out to my father outed me to my mother, and it was just mending that relationship for 3 years of them not speaking to me. Was a struggle too. And then, we don't have all night long, but I got a gay brother too, so we can talk about that. Dynamic was also weird because he saw what I went through, then he came out after me. But I will say that the longer you're forced to live in a situation or an environment, and you get a tribe, and you start to become one with that tribe, and you find your voice in whatever manner that may be within the community, your skin gets tougher. Yeah. You raise your head a little higher. Your clapbacks get even faster, and you realize that this really is who you are, and you surround yourselves with the people that bring the good out and not the bad out.
Dope.
Very nice.
Boy, Mark, go ahead.
I feel old. Wow. Well, I too was raised Baptist. No, I'm just
Here we go.
Happening
We're going.
up here.
This is not.
No,
Y'all,
This is not planned.
we're going to get the
No.
hymnal out.
This is not planned, and we will not sing "Yes, Jesus Loves Me."
No. I was born in Arlington, Texas in 1960 and grew up in Arlington. And yeah, my family was Southern Baptist. They made me go until I was like 10 or 11, and I just rebelled and said, no, this is not for me. And they didn't make me go after that. So, but I remember that upbringing. I came out to my mom in 1975 when I was 15 years old. I grew up in kind of a upper middle class family in Arlington, and my mom had an interior decorator that was gay, and her florist was gay, and all the gay cliche things. So I just remember telling her that I was gay and I wanted her to know, and she told me well, don't rush anything because it's young. When you're young, people experiment a little bit, and don't set anything in stone yet. And I was like, no, Mom, I'm gay. I know I am. She was holding out some hope that maybe I wouldn't be. But I remember she was very kind about it. She's like, well, if that does come to pass that you are gay, I just want you to know that you're still the same son that I raised, and I love you very much. And, it will be a rockier road than I would have hoped for you, but, you'll always have my support. And I was kind of blown away because, back in 1975 in, Ruby Red, Texas, in Arlington, I was like, wow. And she's like, one other thing, don't tell your father. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Because my father was not as receptive to the idea, I think, as my mom. I was really out in high school. I went to Lamar High School in Arlington. And I remember we had civics back then. It was a class that would teach you about government. I don't think they have that anymore in high school curriculum. But I remember we had an assignment. We could either bring a speaker or we could write a paper. And I was like, well, I'm going to bring a speaker because that's so much easier. So I remember calling the MCC church over in Fort Worth and asking a gay priest to come and be my speaker. So this was probably 1976. I was 16, okay. And
Progressive.
yeah, I was going to break it up. I was going to be wild.
I'm from Arlington, so I know exactly. Like, wow, okay. All right.
So class had started, and I remember my speaker was scheduled for midway through the hour, and somebody called me to the principal's office, and they were like, the priest was there with his little pink habit and his black, coat, and I was told by the principal that, however ingenious my idea was and how groundbreaking, it was probably not a great idea that we had him speak because the other parents would probably get pissed off at that idea. And so we kindly asked him to leave. And I talked to him outside a little bit, and he's like, this is some of the things that you're going to have to deal with. And so I went back to the class, and I just said, well, my speaker was so controversial that he's not able to speak. And I went ahead and told him who it was, and I got a lot of eye rolls and blah, blah, blah. But so anyway, that was kind of my coming out at school. I had horses growing up in Arlington, and I remember riding my horse in Randall Mill Park one day, and I kept seeing these men going in and out of the restrooms, and I was just like, they're hot. And I was just like, a young man, didn't know what was going on, and, so I remember tying my horse up to a tree, and I just went in there to pee, and there's like these gay men, and they're having sex, right? And like, well, that became my new favorite place. So, the horse lot, going to the horse lot, Mom had.
I know Randall Mill Park.
It took on a different meaning.
Wow.
Then I know I'm a whore, or I used to be, but I was at this same park about a month later, and these two older guys, they were probably 30. Said, hey, what are you doing? Nice horse, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to go to a gay bar with us? And I was like, a what? They're like, yeah, there's a club in Dallas. It's called the Old Plantation, I think. No, Bayou Landing. And we're going to go Friday night if you'd like to join us. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll just lie and tell my parents I'm sleeping over with whatever, or whoever, not whatever. So I was enlightened to the experience of a gay bar the first time at the age of 17. And this was before AIDS, before HIV, and I was 17, blonde, blue-haired, cute, and, free admission, all the drinks that you want, and it was like being a kid in a candy store.
Because drinking age was 18 back then, correct?
It was, but not if you're cute. You could
Touche.
drink. Yeah, you could drink
Touche.
anytime, anywhere.
Touche.
So I'm just saying.
Because they used to have some. They used to have square. You could smoke on campus, on high school campuses back then too, right?
You could.
'Cause
Yeah.
They had, all those open areas were actually for people that wanted to smoke, like in those little
True.
square areas. Okay. That's
Well, Lamar High School, there was a median, and that's where all the people would smoke before school because
Yeah.
it wasn't city property.
Yeah.
And back then it was called like the freaks and the socials. If you smoked and did dope and smoked pot, you were a freak.
Yeah.
If you were on the football team, you were a social.
Or,
I
yeah.
kind of skated both worlds.
Ah.
So anyway.
yeah.
So I just remember my teens being just, very wild, and I couldn't wait till Friday nights and Saturday nights because I'd be in Dallas at the clubs. And I remember one time I brought a guy home to my parents' house, and my mother cooked him breakfast the next morning.
What year was this?
1977. I was 17, and he was
oh.
probably 20,
Oh,
21.
wow.
And afterwards, my mom said, "Well, honey, wasn't he looks a little old to be in high school?" And I was like, "Well, that's so and so's brother or whatever." So, I mean, I grew up in a very naive time in a lot of
Yeah,
ways that
yeah.
worked to my advantage, or at least I thought. I look back on it now, and I was like, "What the fuck was I doing in a gay bar at 17 years old, picking up men?"
Yeah.
But, it is what it is, and no regrets.
Yeah.
I'm kind of stuck. Where should I go from here?
Well,
I feel like I've said
well, you
too
get no, you
much
get no, you
already.
gave us a lot of
I'm
great
only
content.
17.
No, you because when you got to the, you got me. I was like Randall Mill Park. I remember like taking. I was just like
Randall
Well,
Mill.
I did. Now I have. Okay, that's some good gossip to carry back to
Well.
the town. Anyway, so let's start off first with the culture that you guys interacted with at the time. What were your experiences? You can kind of rapid fire however you guys want to answer, but was the community back then, where did you fit in the community back then? When you first tried to socialize into the community at that point in time?
I mean,
And give us the year, sorry, around that time.
I would say it would be literally 2010 on the dot.
Okay.
I spent about a year in Arlington after high school, thinking I was going to go to UT Austin. Went to UT Arlington, hated it, and so I completely switched gears and went to UNT. So of course, I as soon as I got to UNT was in Dallas every weekend at the gay bars because it was my first kid in the candy store experience. I'd never been to a gay bar. I didn't know what those were. I didn't know you could do the things you could do in a gay bar with another man and be open and free about it. And so I feel like back then it was kind of a different time. I don't feel like I fit in perfect. In the South, I think they still have a large kind of masculine expectation for a gay man. And so back then especially, it was still kind of a different concept to be a petite young man and half Hispanic, ambiguously, like not really certain, who you are, where you're from, that kind of thing. Because I've never really been in Dallas, so I was new altogether. So in that case, I felt like back then, maybe it was my own personal insecurities, but I do feel like I landed on a lower playing field in the community. I felt a little less accepted because I was that small I was the little Mexican guy. Little Mexican Nick is what my number one descriptor was a lot, which was fine. I guess back then to me it was fine, I guess, just for lack of education. But now a lot of times it feels kind of almost fetishized and that kind of sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I enjoyed myself. I got drunk. I I didn't actually drink until I was 19 years old in college. And so as a person with self-discipline troubles, I, just really went in and really spent a lot of time drinking and being out at the bars and kind of learning who I was as a gay man, the things I didn't like about myself as a gay man, and the things that I, really wanted to be. And I kind of realized that it really sometimes can come from the relationships you have, but that's, for me, an individual thing. I think I find myself a lot in how I am reflecting myself within another individual or that intimate relationship I have. I love to have a close relationship with someone that I can feel some security within, maybe that's special, and how I take care of them and how I treat the people that, I'm close to and I love. I'm very good to the people that I love as much as I can. And so for me, that's I guess what resonates with how I kind of worked my way through, the scene and, those people that I was around. I learned very early on that not everybody's to be trusted and not everybody's forever, which is hard, especially for someone who, never really got that dating experience. I think where we're raised or where I was raised, I kind of miss out on so much dating because as like a Gold Star gay, I have never once slept with a woman. I made out with this girl named Tony in the 8th grade once. I had a sleepover, and that was it, y'all. Like, that was it. I was done.
Yeah.
We were girlfriend, boyfriend, but we for sure never did it again. Like, so it was never my thing. So it's just...
So your socialization, like you said, was kind of like trying to navigate through and trying to figure yourself out.
Right. It was just through. It was. I always had that conservative looking glass place over everything, so I felt like I needed to, be a certain way and kind of like you said, just make sure that there was, there's a time and a place for everything, and that's something I've always kind of held on to, and I think back then it was more, the time is very much like. Well, I guess what am I trying to say? A lot less of the gayness and queerness that I really was. And as I've grown older, I feel like in the scene, I've kind of gotten more proud of that queerness and, the peculiarity of it and just the, playing with femme and masculinity and those types of things within the community. So it's really evolved for the second half of my 20s in 2010. And it feels kind of funny to be sitting here discussing this going into 2020 and turning 30 and really coming to such a different place in my life, and I'm very, very happy for the direction that it's gone because I feel like out in this gay community, while I am not holistically accepted at all times, I really am proud of the kind of reputation that I have, and the way people view me and the kind of energy I put out when I'm out in that scene.
Cool, Brad.
Well said. Keep talking. I'm just like listening.
Good job.
It was a different culture for me. In the early '90s is when I first started to really notice men and think about men in a way that I knew that was wrong, but it's still the drive for me. I remember being on set. I was 10 years old. It was 1990. My mother threw my brother and I into modeling at an early age, and so we were, I don't even know if they still make these. It was the JCPenney catalog. We were doing a kid shoot for the catalog, and in the same studio, like one room over, you could see all of the men in their 30s doing the underwear shoot. So they were doing the underwear shoot while we were doing like the little kids with our family shoot. And I remember just just being in awe of these men in their underwear. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do you find more of that? And this was before the internet. This is before I'm 11 and I'm 12 years old. And so I realized quickly that whenever we went to go school clothes shopping or any kind of store or mall, I could go to like the underwear aisle and see pictures of those men. And I would like literally steal the pictures and take them home, because that was when you're 12 and 13 and 14 before internet. That's your version of pornography. And I'll never forget my mother finding my stash of like underwear ads. Oh my God. And thinking, oh God, she knows, and I don't know, I hate that this is such a preconceived notion of gay men, but sounds like some of us up here have the overbearing mother, distant father upbringing, which I know that's exactly what I had. And so, you tell your mother something long enough and sweet enough, she'll believe that you just kept those because, you were a kid model and that's what you were aspiring to be, is the underwear model. She's like, you're right, that's right, let's go to church. And so it was a different world for me trying to even grow up and become familiar in my skin and my sexuality and what is right and what is wrong. And then, fast forward to graduating high school, I had a girlfriend, so I couldn't tell her. We were sneaking out to the Village Station. Is that what it was called before S4? Okay, Village Station. And so we would do that behind everyone's back. And so for me, culturally, it was all about not being outed and not being seen out here and coming down with my straight friends on dollar straight nights, and anything that you can do to say that you're not really gay, you're just coming down here because it's fun. And so we did that for many, many years, honestly, until I decided to go away. And that's when I did the Vegas stint and the cruise ship stint and became familiar with myself and came back to Dallas and came out. And that was like pre-Brad, and then coming out being okay Brad was a whole nother ballgame. I'm like, God, you can get involved in that organization, and you can go into this club and not have to lie about it. And how do I volunteer? And it was gay overload at first, because I, was hardwired to always be doing the most, right? Always be extra. And so immediately at 25, 26, 27, when I started to really become familiar with myself, I started getting involved in organizations and showing up and showing out and doing things. And so culturally for me, that's when I really felt comfortable as me. I mean, before all that, it was more so ashamed. It was a shame to be out. It was a shame to even familiarize myself with what was down here and what all was happening. And but it's such a different world now. For me, I understand that the struggle is so real for so many people. But that's sort of where it landed for me. It was just a different time. If you're talking about 90s to late 90s to early 2000s, and fast forward to damn near 2020 now, and I'm, the chairman of the largest LGBTQ charity event of its kind. So it's just night and day different.
And we're going to talk about that too as well.
I like what both you guys said, and so many of those things are still true, unfortunately, but fortunately in other ways. For me, I think I left off at 17, but anyway, I left high school. I went to Houston for a few years, went to college, and moved back to Dallas in '81. At the time, I had an older partner. He was a doctor. He was 40, and I was 21. And he was pretty wealthy, and we lived on Swiss Avenue, and he had a Rolls-Royce Corniche, and I got the Rolls-Royce convertible. And I remember circling JRs until I could get a parking spot right in the front, so I could cruise in with my Rolex day date and my Louis Vuitton clutch. And yeah, I was bougie, and I just I was just thought I was the T, right? Well, I guess I kind of was, but looking back on it all, it's just so surfacey and so. But it's very Dallas. It's very how it was back then. I think it probably still is, but. It's all about where you work, what car you drive, how much money do you have, and what do you look like, and who do you fuck. That never changes. But anyway, looking back on my coming out, I think I stayed kind of sheltered with my feelings about being gay. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I would always remember expending I called it 10% of my energy being in a bubble, because let's face it, we always have to kind of be aware being gay. For straight people's sarcasm, their looks. We all had to learn how to read people real from a early age, whether they were our friend or going to be a danger to us. And back then in Oak Lawn, Oak Lawn was pretty gay. It was the Mecca, because we couldn't just move to Richardson or Plano. We had to there was strength in numbers. And this was back before this neighborhood was so gentrified, where you could still afford an apartment, and it wasn't all 3-story walk-ups for $900,000 or whatever. And subsequently, you would see more interesting people down here. You would see drag queens living here. You'd see hookers walking Cedar Springs. Late 70s, early 80s, and it was just more interesting. You could see people walking home after their tricks on Friday and Saturday nights in the morning, and the crawl of shame, and it was very interesting. Very colorful.
Oh. So, for all of your eras, what was the biggest, I'd say, at the time, what was the biggest crisis or fear as a community, or what was some of the things that you would say the average were worried about at that time?
I'll start if you don't mind. It was in 1983. We started hearing about GRID. Didn't have a name for HIV or AIDS yet, and it was Subpatient Zero out of San Francisco. I think he was a flight attendant. And we started hearing there was no Dallas Voice. There was a magazine called TWT, This Week in Texas, and it was distributed to all the major cities. But anyway, we started hearing about gay men getting sick with disease in their their immune system. And that's the main thing that we became scared of, was dying. And I stopped counting after 47 funerals, I think, in 1986. I stopped going. I remember the lesbian community stepping up and helping us, because a lot of my friends were sick or in denial. There were no drugs. The only thing that was available was AZT, and it was given to us as kind of a bombarding cancer treatment. And we were told usually we'd have 2 to 3 years to live, maybe. So, it was just a weird time. Nobody really knew. And, I didn't know. Do you catch this disease from kissing? Can you get it from oral sex, anal? Is it in the air? Is it through your blood? Is it in your saliva? Can you transmit it through food or drink? There was just so many variables and so much fear. But of course, life went on and people still drank and had sex and did the things that they did. I will say this: I mean, if you look around the community now, you don't see many people, gay men in their mid 50s to mid 60s, because they're all dead. I mean, not all of them, but I mean, a lot of them. I'm HIV positive. I've been positive since 1991. So I was very lucky. I caught the curve of the disease and the new medicines, and I'm still here. So, been zero detectable for years, but I feel very lucky to be here, because many of my friends are not. I'll say this: there was so much fear about it. I remember a lot of my friends that would sell their life insurance policies, and those were advertised in the TWT magazine, because if you're going to die in a year and a half, you might as well sell everything and party down, right? Or travel, or go to Mexico, or drown yourself in booze and drugs, which a lot of people did as well. Unfortunately for those people, some of them caught the late end of the curve with the new drugs, and so they're alive, but they were broke. So, I mean, that's not a horrible outcome, but it is an eventuality of spending all your cash. So it was just a really weird time. I remember I knew Terry Thibodeau and Bill Nelson, and they were more of acquaintances. They weren't like my best friends, but people rallied around, and especially people, the gay community, men with money, which we do have a lot of disposable income. So a lot of donations were given, and the resource center and the Nelson Thibodeau Clinic were opened. Politically, it was horrible. Our president at the time, Reagan, he never mentioned the word AIDS. It was all about Nancy Reagan with her drug program, Just Say No. And of course, being the sarcastic gay man I was, I thought she should incorporate manners into that and just say no, thank you. So anyway, yeah, a little stinted humor.
So
But
how was Dallas? Like you said, was the because I've spoken to people that were in New York, and how they were, and how that was sort of like, it was like a, I don't want to say
It was different.
It was like a war zone. I don't want to say that to make it sound lightly, but it felt like from their experience it was like a war zone out there.
Yeah, the high
And-
population areas were definitely hit harder. I mean, San Francisco, New York, but I mean, Dallas back then still had a fairly large gay community, kind of commensurate with what we have now.
So was it just that community center, or was it like were hospital wards?
No, I don't know if anybody's seen Dallas Buyers Club, but
Yeah.
with Matthew McConaughey and cute little Jared Leto.
Jared
Leto.
Leto.
Thank you. Anyway, Jay Leno. No, the opposite.
Not like Jay
The
Leno.
opposite of Jay Leno.
Yeah.
Jared Leto.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. I remember people were going, to Mexico to try to get drugs that were, trying different cocktails of things. People were trying to take concentrated hydrogen peroxide, colloidal silver, lots of vitamin regimens, lots of fasting. People that I knew that had money were going to France. This was about the time Rock Hudson came out with AIDS,
Yeah.
late 80s, 87. But in New York, there was ACT UP, and people were getting really radical about it.
Yeah.
We did not have that here in Dallas, unfortunately, because I think, being in the Bible Belt, people are a little more reserved.
Yeah.
But I remember that going on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Brad.
I would have to say, even though I was born in 1980, I would definitely say HIV and AIDS for sure. Still, for me, it is probably what our community has had to face that's the most trying. Only because, too, growing up in that, for me, unfortunately, when you're coming of your own and you're, like I said, 10 years old at that photo shoot, right? That's 1990, right? And so the only thing you see on television about anyone gay is, unfortunately, the one character on Melrose Place, the first round of it, when it's the gay hot mess drug addict. That's the only thing I could watch with my mother and be like, oh, that's a gay man. Or it was the negative things you would hear on the news about HIV and AIDS killing people, or AIDS killing people rather. And so to kind of have that impression growing up of the disease and the epidemic, and then it just continued too. You watch The Real World, and then he passes away, and then all of the different stories.
Pedro.
Yeah, Pedro, absolutely.
yes.
Thank you. All of that growing up or even into the early '90s, I think, for me at least, with so many of my friends living with HIV now, at a point where even hearing your story is just takes you to a place where you're like, holy shit, you don't even know a lot of the journeys of so many people that are living with it. And I think, for me at least, I think that's one of the main reasons that philanthropically giving back and helping ASOs across North Texas too means so much to me and so many of my friends as well, just because you don't know until you start talking to people. But I would have to say the same thing that he said. And then Trump, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to unfortunately say the same thing. When I was, kind of back then, it was still something that wasn't discussed as much, and I think there was even that still really sad context of like whether you were dirty or clean, and just how we phrased it and how we discussed it. HIV is still not a conversation back when I was that age that you really could have. Like I remember a moment taking a sip of a friend's drink who was HIV positive and fearing for my life, and I was like completely ignorant to the whole concept and the whole idea. So it is very sad to see so many generations still fear HIV and the conversation around it. I personally have taken a large stance in a big change in how I handle HIV. I worked with Impulse for a year as their marketing director, and I really enjoyed the work and the community and just bringing the discussion to the surface, because obviously it's something that is still continuing to this point, that it's something we have to discuss. It's something we have to, meet head on. And not everything's perfect. We're even still now discussing whether Truvada is the best idea or whether being on PrEP is the right thing for you. But at the end of the day, it's still the
what's
conversation.
PrEP, just so, because it is being recorded.
PrEP is, Truvada is a exposure
prophylactic drug.
Prophylactic. Yeah.
It's a preventative.
So it's going to help prevent the transmission of HIV. You take it on a daily basis. Some people do take certain times and breaks and things like that. And I think that's where the challenge is now we're getting to this place where it has become a little more common, and it is showing a lot of, adverse side effects. So it's unfortunate that has to go hand in hand, but at the end of the day, it's still the conversation. And being aware of, what's out there and educating those people. Because as a small town kid, sex education was not really more than, this is your sexual organ, these are the parts, and you don't use it. We're still in the Bible Belt, and this is not what you use it only for after being married. Yeah. And that's the thing is, as someone as young as I was, and I guess kind of appreciate my conservatism when it came to sleeping around, because I had no idea, I had no education. I would believe anything some hot dude said. Okay. I really would.
Well, first of all, we'd like to thank our lesbian sisters that stepped in the 80s and, stepped up during the 90s.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of them, they definitely did take care of a lot of gay men, when families stepped out and weren't really there for them.
I'd like to throw this out, and I know that we're discussing this a little bit before we started, but with the lesbian and the bars and, the how we don't mix.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about next. Yeah,
were you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the thing I wanted to say about that is that the lesbian community. I mean, of course, male or female can contract the disease, but back then it was mostly gay men, and the lesbian community, nursing people, accounting people, realtors, heads of the community, they were not doing anything at the resource center. They were doing kitchen table meetings and people in their living rooms and calling and networking, getting bedrooms set up for people and transportation, and they just we handled it all, and there was a coming together in a way. But as far as the bars and the gay life were going on, it was totally different still. I mean, I remember having some lesbian friends who were like, we couldn't get into JRs because they were carding people, and they wanted 3 IDs, and we couldn't have open-toed shoes, or we had to have long-sleeve shirt on. So it was just a general harassment of the lesbian community. And it's unfortunate. I'm not sure if that still goes on, but I think it's still kind of segregated as of today even. I don't go out to the bars anymore, so I'm not really sure. But
Well,
it's just weird how it was.
Yeah. So would you guys say that it's still on a social exchange, still sort of the tribal mentality that everybody sort of still associates with their?
I think it depends on the situation and who you are. Honestly, I mean,
Okay.
I will say that over the years, there was this negative stigma that gay guys and lesbians don't get along and they don't intermingle and they don't mix. And thankfully, because actually I prefer Sue Ellen's more than any bar, and I'm not just saying that because we're sitting in here. But no, I know a lot of the people that work here, and quite frankly, I have a lot of my close friends are lesbian, but that wasn't always the case too. But I do think there's always that sort of siloed approach in any community. I think Dallas, good God, if you get into like, are you, do you dress up in a tuxedo on the weekend, or do you take to go dance in your underwear? Are you part of this club or that organization? And I hate that that's still like that, but it just very much is. That's the unfortunate truth about this city and this community. Mm-hmm. So I think, in answer to your question, yes, we still have those pockets of people, and because we feel comfortable staying in those pockets, it's hard to break the walls down.
And do you also, just from I guess you could say from an observational standpoint, it normally seems as though when there's a tragedy or an issue, that's when people want to call all the nations together to sort of rally. But it's when it's more like, for example, Dallas recently was dealing with the African American trans women that were being murdered, and it seemed as though that wasn't taken as, or a lot of the other subsets within the community weren't really acknowledging or trying to, call to arms of like, hey, like, look, like what's going on here. Even not even from the sense of us like, but just acknowledging what's happening.
I think that the trans community, I mean, for me, has been ignored completely. I mean, it was very much not even spoken about back in the late 70s and early 80s. I mean, I know there were trans people around. I would see them, but they were very much still in the shadows back then, or they hung out in the bars, like the drag bars, and you didn't know if they were a drag queen or trying to be a girl, or they were a girl, or they were half a girl or half a boy. Just didn't know, didn't ask. So, and I'll be honest, I mean, my understanding of trans people has significantly grown in the last 20 years, but back when I was in my 20s, I didn't really know what it was. I didn't really, because I wasn't around it that much. And to be quite honest, I didn't care, sort of. I mean, I was just if I had my drink and my cocktail and my boyfriend and my car, I was happy. And I think that to answer your question in relationship to the trans murders, unfortunately, I believe that unless it happens to you or a close friend of yours, a lot of people just don't give a fuck. And they just, they don't. And I think that's very sad. But, it's like, I like to compare it to like if we're having a war. You have Democrats, Republicans, but we're in a war. We're all Americans, right?
Yeah.
And we like to pull together.
Yeah.
And I think the gay community, for me, pulled together the most in the 80s. I mean, with the AIDS crisis.
I would agree with that. And I would also say, too, I think people are fearful of what they don't know or what they're not educated on. And unfortunately, the T in our LGBTQ community, for a lot of people, and including myself for the longest, was the area that was the sort of the grayest, or like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to be offensive. I thought I knew what it is, but post-op or pre-op or genderqueer versus, then we would throw around terms like, oh, trisexual, I'll try anything. But then you throw in things like cisgender. And so you really have to educate yourself on all of those different labels. I mean, my husband's sister is an out lesbian. And on a family camping trip last summer, her girlfriend comes out as transgender. And in front of the entire family says that she now wants to go by he and him pronouns, and that he should be referred to as Jackson the rest of the trip. So even myself was like, I was so nervous. I kept saying her. I kept saying she. And so you have to like really stop and be mindful of it. And then, from people like us that are involved in the community, David, my husband's mother, cornered me, and she goes, you go to gay events. Mom and dad, we have questions. So if the lesbian sister is now dating technically a man, is she lesbian anymore? And I'm like, that's the kind of shit that blows your fucking mind if you like let it get there to the level where you're like, I don't know that answer. For a second, is Nicole, the lesbian sister, is Nicole happy? Does she seem happy to you? And the mom said she's the happiest she's ever been. I said, then let's not worry about labels and focus on her happiness, because I didn't know how to answer that question at the moment. But I think it's moments like that that make us kind of nervous and fearful to get even more involved. But I think you're right. Our trans community is under attack at the moment, and people aren't listening and aren't acting out the way that they should, in my opinion.
Nick, I know you have some feelings.
Yes. I think it is very important to protect black trans women. I feel like, as we all know, black women are the most marginalized and almost mistreated people in this American country. So a even more marginalized individual is at a much higher risk. And I think at this point, it's very clear that nowhere is really that safe. I never thought in my community I would be reading about women being murdered because of their gender. It's very sad. I will say that I feel like my generation is the one thing I can be proud of is I feel like we are a generation for a lot of firsts. And I feel like this, even when I first entered the gay community, I still had a very largely ignorant understanding of what a transsexual woman was, the concept. I knew it was something, but it was not something I understood. And it's something that I feel like has, again, like HIV, grown as a conversation larger and been more present. And I feel like that is something that my generation, I hope, really continues to do, is to be the precipice of a first. You know, we got the first set, the internet transition, because I remember being on analogs, and y'all have downloaded some real ridiculous porn on on dial-up. Have we ever downloaded porn on dial-up? Okay. I mean, that load was the most stressful load, because what if somebody walked in while it was like halfway here?
Like cat
some dude,
burglary.
what am I going to come up
Yes.
with if it gets to his
You
dick
had to
before she
unplug
walks?
the computer.
Okay.
Unplug the computer immediately.
So, I mean, it's a lot of firsts, and I'm proud of that for my community and my generation. But I feel like we do get kind of labeled as big crybabies, but at the end of the day, we understand that societally, like, there is just a systematic oppression and marginalization of people in subdivisions. Okay. Even within our own marginalized community, we still have a bad habit of picking those pockets and placing labels on top of people. And so it's just something I'm very proud of, as far as raising the conversation as individuals who deserve to be elevated, not just because they are a certain thing or what have you. It's just systematically that's how it is.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask you guys 3 questions, and you got to answer them all pretty short, because then we're about to get to the Q&A section. So what is one positive thing you feel your generation maybe have accomplished or kind of gave to the culture? Number 2, what is one thing you wish that y'all could have been better at? Okay. And then the last one is, what do you feel personally areas of growth that we as a community or as a culture in general, in one word or less, or maybe in one sentence or less, we have to get to the point with or do better with? So I'll start, if you want to start off.
I think that for me, it would be we fought a lot for our rights and legal battles and marching and demonstrations. I'm not Stonewall old, but I mean, I remember it in Harvey Milk, back then, and fighting with Anita Bryant and boycotting Coors and, just the little things. I mean, we really fought hard, so that you guys could, not so much that you would have a better life, but we knew that we needed to do what we could do for us. And so I'm proud of that. And also, it's singularly, not just big things, but one person at a time. Like, I made it a point to, let people know I was gay, and if it made them uncomfortable, even better. Because I like to kind of toy with it and fuck with people, I just still do. But, I did that as a young man growing up, and I'd let them get to know me. I'm a nice guy. I'm just a person that likes guys. So I think that on a small level, that. The second thing was...
One thing that that you guys felt like was probably one of your shortcomings?
Too much drinking and drugs. I mean, I remember coming out here and I don't remember a lot of the 80s. I was just wasted. You could buy ecstasy at JR's in the 80s. Like the bartender could sell it to you. So it was all sex and drugs, and not a lot of people thought about safe sex, which is really unfortunate because that's the part of the problem. And then the thing that I think we should concentrate on in the future, and being the token old person here, is looking more towards help for our older LGBT community, because as we age out, my husband passed away 2 years ago after 23 years. So I'm single now. I live alone. I'm not sure if I'll have a relationship again or not. I mean, it's not important to me right now. I'm perfectly happy with who I am. But when you get older, you think about, well, what if I get sick? You know, am I going to do this by myself? Is there any communal living that I can do? And there's not. So I think that's something I would like to see the gay community think about a little bit more. And not only that, but engaging older people, because, I mean, we have a wealth of knowledge that we could share. But, you know, it's a lot of, Dallas is so cliquey that, you know, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Walk up to some 20-year-old and say, I'm going to talk to you about life, little boy, you know, and him not thinking I'm going to hit on him or something. And I'm not interested in, you know.
Sometimes you gotta.
Well, I have with people I've worked with. I'm like, you know, Queen, are you going to go vote? No, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, it does. You know, let me take you to lunch and tell you about it. So, I mean, I do initiate, but I just wish sometimes people were a little more receptive to hearing what older people have to say. So that's my take.
I would say, working backwards with your questions, if I can remember all of them, I think
Positive.
I would say that at least in my lens that I'm viewing the world, I think that for those who were proud to come out, they were proud to come out. They did use their voice. They did stand up. They did march. They did go in drag. They did say, I don't care if for me personally, my mom and dad aren't going to talk to me for 3 or 4 years. That's just how it was. Now, granted, the road to that was hard as fuck, but once we got to that point, we were happy to come out and be proud about it and continue to just get louder and more vocal about who we are as a gay man. I think one of the things that we didn't do, and we did a disservice to ourselves, is we put up barriers. I think we got so excited about our community that for whatever reason, the social determinants of becoming a little bit more inclusive with our efforts, the walls were then up in a way. And so I would like to see us, in answer to your last question, start to remove the barriers to help get the community even wider than it is now, whether it
More
is
inclusive.
age, whether it's gender, whether it's where you live or where you work. I mean, I have so many friends that live off 635 and they're like, oh, we're not going to come down there, it's just so far, we have
Zip
gay
code
people
shaming,
here.
yeah.
Go, God, yeah.
Zip code shaming, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say you said be short, so remove barriers.
Okay.
There we go. Very
Nick.
long-winded girl.
I guess for me, I would say the one hope I have for my generation is still, again, going back to being a generation of first. Like, continue to push and drive for new things and be some type of change within the world. I think we definitely have a large miss as a generation in the sense that we get so lost in our own individual struggle that we either project it or we almost kind of compartmentalize everyone else in that sense. And while, yes, we can generalize people and say this generation is going to behave this way or that's how, that's where they come from or what have you, every human has an individual experience. So every human is going to have an experience that may be similar, and we might have some, parallels in our lives, but everyone is different in that sense. And I really hope that, we can finally start to really begin a one humanity type of solidarity. Look at things as far as being as a general one people, one human race, one planet, because at some point it's going to have to be that way. So I really hope I think we miss out on that. We're too individualistic in my generation, and it's unfortunate.
And you said the one human thing would be what you would consider as the hope for us. Okay. Well, this is our panel. I'd like to thank Mark, Brad, Nick.
Thank you all for doing this.
Thank you guys so much. Okay, so
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Michael, I'm not Michael. I'm
Thomas.
Or Bob. This is Gage. I'm Thomas.
I'm sorry, Thomas.
G&T.
Thomas.
Jeez.
So sorry. I can
Michael-
blame it. I can blame it on the old.
No, you can blame it on us. Okay, so we're gonna if Gage want to get up here, and if some TJ, do you have your camera? So we're gonna take a quick photo with all of us together, and then you guys are dismissed. Like school. Dismissed. Remember, I'm chocolate, so use the flash.
Just in general, use the flash.
Use the flash because I'm chocolate.